Hey guys, it's Andrea. Sorry I can't be with you there today. I'm coming at you from a hotel room in the Caribbean. That's a lie. I'm really not in the Caribbean. I wish I was. Unfortunately, I'm on a medical leave and won't be able to join you today for this very historic shared governance retreat. I think it's going to change a lot of what we do at Bay Health and nursing, and I think it's, like I said, a very historic day, and I'm sorry that I'm missing it. My part today is a couple things. I want to start by showing my absolute support and gratitude to both Anne and Ronnie for keeping our small work group going over the last probably 5 to 6 months. They have reminded us over and over that change is kind of scary, and it's hard, but it can also be for a lot of good. As we continue to kind of excel our nursing workforce forward, and as we look forward to magnet redesignation, I think this is a necessary step. And again, thank you, Anne and Ronnie, for keeping us on task and helping us through this change. I also want to say that I'm really, really proud of the work group itself. We were nurses from a variety of different areas. I was privileged to be there because I'm the Magnet Program Director, but we had nurses, nursing representatives from across the campuses and across nursing specialties. We came to the table month after month, and slowly but surely came up with a proposed structure for our Magnet Council structure. We participated in shared decision making, and whether or not the larger group today accepts our proposal as is, or whether there's going to be changes, I feel very confident as the Magnet Program Director that we've used very good processes. We've used shared decision making. We've used consensus whenever possible to come up with this new structure and bylaws for you to review today. And I believe this process, again, in the spirit of Magnet and shared decision making, is what we'll continue to use as we move forward. So my main objective for looking ridiculous and videoing myself today is to explain the relevance of Magnet in the council restructure process. So as we look forward to the future and to redesignation, the application in particular, the document, if you will, councils and sub-councils are going to be expected to have a greater role and have more influence in the application itself. We want the councils to be like a conduit of information for preparation of the Magnet document. And this is what I'm going to explain a little bit more in the video. So let's start with the application manual. Just like any accreditation or from a specialty organization or from a governing body of any kind, it always starts with a manual. And as you know, there is a Magnet manual. You see me carry that green manual around with me and open it up all the time. That's kind of like our Bible, if you will, for all things Magnet. The Magnet manual is full of what we call standards. It's just like anything else. We start with standards. We also call them sources of evidence, or SOEs. So any of those things basically means standards of Magnet. In the 2014 Magnet manual, and let me say that's all we have to work with right now. We know that in 2018 or somewhere thereabouts there's going to be a new manual coming out, but right now all we have is the 2014 manual. So there are 5 major sections in the manual. We have the organizational overview, transformational leadership, structural empowerment, exemplary professional practice, and new knowledge, improvements, and innovations. When I started to look at the organizational overview, it sort of stands alone. It's a collection of documents and tables and graphs that provide the appraisers with basic information about Bay Health. It gives them a context, if you will, for the document that they're about to read. So there are 20 items in the organizational overview, and it's things like our history, policies, the chief nurse executive job description and her CV, annual reports, quality reports, patient safety plans, strategic plans, and anything else that might be relevant to what an appraiser would need to read before they start reading our actual document. It's not something that is scored. So it's really objective data. There's no stories or anything that we write. It's just basic information. So when Anne asked me to, from a magnet perspective, to consider how to weave these magnet standards, these accountabilities, into the expectations of the councils, I didn't feel that the organizational overview section of the manual was something that would be relevant for the council. So I think, in my opinion, those 20 items, and it's 20 things, they need to remain the sole responsibility of the Magnet Program Director, which is me, or the Magnet Program Office. So we will be responsible for the organizational overview. So let's move on to the sources of evidence. And by the way, I mentioned transformational leadership, TL. I mentioned SE, structural empowerment, EP, exemplary professional practice, and NK, new knowledge. I know you know those. There are two other letters that I haven't mentioned yet. Do you know what they are? That's right, EO. EO stands for empirical outcomes. Remember, empirical outcomes are integrated into all four of the magnet domains, all four of those sections. Every domain has standards or sources of evidence that need empirical data. So if we're working on a standard that has an EO, we always have to show data before, data during, and then after implementation of whatever project it is that we're talking about. So here's an example. And yes, this is my favorite, and I use it over and over, and I know that. I can't ride this wave forever, but let's talk about safe patient handling. In EP18EO, it says that workplace safety for nurses is evaluated and improved. So if we're writing about the Safe Patient Handling Program, number one, we're going to tell the story. We're going to talk about how we allocated capital funding, how we moved it through the Clinical Safety Council, how we strategically placed equipment over a period of several years. But the EO part of that is where we would have to show data. So we would have to show, for example, patient handling injuries of nurses that occurred before implementation of the program, while the program was being implemented, and then afterward. And we would need to show that there is a decrease in patient handling injuries, which we did in the last document. Now, if Bonnie's in the room, she's going to want me to mention this, that whatever we start measuring the data in, whatever interval, so if we're talking about monthly scores and we're measuring something monthly in the kind of the pre-data phase, we have to continue to measure that data monthly during implementation and afterwards. And in the after part of the data presentation, we have to show at least 3 data points. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that, so you're welcome, Bonnie. Okay, back to the 4 domains and the proposed new work of the councils. So Anne asked me about Magnet, and she asks, how do we incorporate Magnet into this new structure? After I excluded the 20 items from the organizational overview, I then considered the sources of evidence or the standards in the 4 domains. So that's again TL, SE, EP, and NK. So what remained were 49 standards, and those divided up into those 4 sections. Of that 49, I read through each one of them, and I carefully considered whether or not that source of evidence had any relevance whatsoever to any of the proposed councils. And I was able to narrow that number down from 49 to 36. And believe me, that's still a lot. Because remember, in this new manual, they don't just ask for one single thing. There's a lot of and. So they want to show an example of how, patient injuries were reduced and how nurse injuries were reduced, for example. There's a lot of and. So there's multiple parts to each one of those sources of evidence. So we had 36 standards that kind of seemed like they fit some kind of way with these new proposed councils. So over 2 to 3 smaller retreats, I presented those 36 standards to the work group that was working on this proposal. I categorized them by domain, so TL had so many, SE had so many, and so on. We broke our group into 4 smaller groups, so each little group took basically a domain and the standards that went with that domain. And we used, I'm going to show you this table. We used a table like this. Once the smaller work groups finished, we reviewed all 36 standards together as a larger group. We had discussion, and then we made consensus to make final recommendations for what council should own which standard or which sources of evidence. Now, one major decision that the work group made was that, and you're going to see this when you read the bylaws, is that only major councils, not sub-councils, will have magnet accountabilities or magnet standards woven into their bylaws. In our proposal, it is the responsibility of the larger council to coordinate and facilitate that collection of information, but the accountability does lie with that larger council. So an example, there's an SOE that discusses reward and recognition. It's SE11, actually. It's not an EO, but we have that assigned to the accountabilities for the Professional Practice Council. However, there's a sub-council that we're proposing for professional practice called Reward and Recognition. Now, obviously, it's that Reward and Recognition sub-council that would be collecting the information and doing the work to meet that source of evidence. However, it is the Professional Practice Council's responsibility to assure that information gets sent to the magnet office in an appropriate time frame. So when we finished deciding where to put the accountabilities for the 36 SOEs, I sent the proposed list for each of the core councils to different members of the work group, and they incorporated those magnet accountabilities into the bylaws. They were all put together into one document, which you're going to be going over and reading today. Now, let me say this. The distribution of work among the councils related to magnet is not equal. You will see a council with 2 or 3 magnet accountabilities, and then you're going to see another council with 8 or 9. I think there's one council that even has 10 accountabilities. Now, we gave consideration to how much more responsibility one council might have over another. However, we felt that it was imperative that standards be placed where the greatest alignment with the overall work of the council. So it didn't make sense to force, a magnet standard on a council where that work just wasn't relevant to them. And let me say this now, my apologies in advance to the Education Council. I think you win the prize for the most magnet accountabilities. I hope I've explained this well enough for you. In case I didn't, or if you fell asleep during my little video here, here's the so what from a magnet perspective. What we did is we took the most relevant magnet SOEs, there's 36 of them, and we divided them, not really divided, but we assigned them to different councils, to the core councils. This was done by all work group members. We did this as a group. And we put them again in the councils where the accountabilities were most closely aligned to the overall work of the council. As you move through the day, you will be reviewing the proposed structure for our new shared governance councils and also reviewing the objectives, major activities, and accountabilities of each of the councils. Please keep the spirit of Magnet in mind as you make decisions and as you vote or approve or change this new structure. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. Oh, and someone, please take really good minutes because I'm sure I'm going to be writing about this day in the next document. Thank you guys. Take care, and I'm going to see all of you very soon.